NightMerica is an independently produced podcast. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica. And please tell your friends about us.
Welcome to NightMerica, a podcast that takes you on a tour of the abnormal, paranormal, weirdly true, and truly weird in every corner across this nation. Because, to paraphrase Ray Parker Jr., whether it's ghosts, aliens, monsters, or monstrous humans, there's something strange in your neighborhoods.
Hey, NightMericans. Happy Wednesday or whatever day you're listening to this episode. We are taking the week off this week, so we have decided to share with you our very first Patreon episode, just to give you a little taste of what you might be missing out on if you aren't currently one of our sponsors. So please enjoy, and we'll see you next week.
And I'm Aaron Sagers, one of your hosts of NightMerica, and excited to be here. That's your line, isn't it?
That's my line.
That's your
I'm
line.
excited to be here as well.
And who are you?
I'm Britt. I am the other co-host for NightMerica. Not a paranormal journalist by any means, but a spooky things fangirl. And I attempt to be an expert on true crime.
As in you've committed many crimes. Truly.
Yes, truly.
Truly. So the idea with this is, as previously stated, to just get a diversity of voices, kind of different takes, male, female, different ages. Like, for instance, when we were talking about the internets and all that, you have a very specific take on being a woman that's out there dating, using dating apps, younger, things that, like, it's funny, I think, like, guys, myself included, I try to be conscientious, I try to be, like, aware of, like, what it's like to be a woman moving about the world and the security concerns and all that you have to consider, but I have no real clue. Like, I try to sympathize, but I can't really truly empathize.
But to pay you a compliment, you are much more aware than most men.
Well, thank you. That is a compliment.
I think it partially is because you're close to your niece, and you've got a sister, and you've got a lot of good female friends. You are more aware than most men.
I just, like, it does, like, and I think that's the thing with the true crime stuff. When I listen to it, like, as I've mentioned before, some of the stuff that I listen to, like, My Favorite Murder, right? Great podcast.
My favorite podcast.
And outside of this one, hopefully.
Yes.
We're not there yet. We're not even our own favorites.
No, I'm not. Karen Kilgariff will forever and always be my favorite.
Solid top 10, NightMerica. But, you know.
It's like My Favorite Murder, Sinisterhood, and then NightMerica.
Somewhere down the line is our own podcast. To be fair, my own projects are never my favorite projects because I'm too close to them and I'm, like, really self-conscious. But when I listen to, like, My Favorite Murder, and I think I respect that it's two women that are having this conversation, and I'm like, oh my freaking God, when I hear about some of these stories, because, like, it's 95% women that all of these horrible things are happening to.
Yeah, it is.
And you have to think about, is that why you like it so much? Like, but not that you, like, is it sort of a survival mechanism?
I think it's a survival mechanism. As a woman, being able to hear and listen, you often hear I survived type of stories. And so being able to learn from that is really fantastic. Sure. There's also that really great book that touches on this called The Gift of Fear by, I believe, Gavin de Becker that I've read, that talks about how your body knows how to be afraid of something before your mind does, like how your hair stands on end and when you walk into some place, and I think that's what it is it's like a survival mode to be prepared for. But it's funny that you mentioned it mostly being women, because the story that I'll get into later today, men are the victims.
Flip side, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me recommend for everyone out there, sort of along that same line is a good friend of mine, sociologist, PhD, Dr. Margie Kerr. She wrote a book called Scream, I believe, and it's all about the sociology of fear.
Ooh.
And not specifically true crime, but she gets into that a little bit, but sort of the necessity of fear and what's happening with our brains and our bodies when we are afraid. And she kind of puts herself through multiple scenarios to kind of stoke it and find out what's going on as a framing tactic for the science about it. But we have also talked at length about things like haunted houses and horror movies and the sociology of fear surrounding that. I would recommend that for you. If
I will, as soon as the libraries reopen.
Or I could probably just loan you a copy.
Oh, okay. Once I can see you again.
yeah, I can mail it. I'll Postmate it over to you.
Sounds good.
Postmate's
Ooh, with some barbecue.
Yeah, with some barbecue. I'm definitely wanting some barbecue. So that's it. Yeah. Okay. So our topic today is we're gonna talk a little bit about Americana, roadside attractions, kind of things, road trips.
As we're stuck in quarantine.
I know.
Dreaming about a vacation.
Right. And also, like, I think I talked about this a little bit. I had read American Gods recently by Neil Gaiman. Great book. First time reading it. Took me a long time to finally read it. Because, I don't know, I just wasn't really ready for it yet. Love it. Now one of my favorite books. But it talks a lot about the power of, well, sort of American culture and people coming over to this country, bringing their own religions, their own gods, essentially. But it also talks about the power of sort of roadside attractions. They're sort of holy places in America, in a way, because people are drawn to them for whatever unknown reason. And even, they're like sort of places of worship almost. And that's a fascinating concept to me. What's your favorite, like, roadside attraction or weird thing that you've been drawn to?
I've never stopped at a roadside attraction.
Really?
We went on road trips. Actually, I have it. Okay.
Here's the twist.
You're so going to laugh at me for this.
I was probably going to laugh at you.
Anyway. Growing up in Europe, it's just so awesome that our road trips from Paris are going to Germany and going to Italy. That I was so fortunate with that. And we frequently would go to the south of France on our road trips. And going down to the south of France, there's a roadside attraction called the Nougat House.
Okay.
It is a house, like a cute little... there's a comic in France called Asterix. It's like a Viking. It's like a little Viking shanty house that just sells nougat. Yeah. I don't even like nougat, but that's my favorite roadside attraction is the Nougat House.
Okay. Growing up, as I've mentioned before, I grew up in Florida, so we had a lot of road trips. As I mentioned, youngest of 5, we would drive most places. But when you're driving into South Carolina, I believe it is, that when you cross, there's a thing called South of the Border. And it's one of these attractions that is advertised for miles and miles, like 100 miles or something. And there's just these very punny, goofy billboards along the road for, it feels like 100 miles. But when you approach it, it is kind of cool, but it's not anything really fancy or whatever. It's just basically over glamorized shopping area, and not even like a fancy shopping area. It's just
like an outlet mall or something.
No, like souvenirs and stuff, and like a motel and whatnot, and
you can get a magnet and
light up sombrero kind of thing.
You went to this place and you didn't bring me back a giant light up sombrero.
Actually,
this podcast is over.
I know. Yes, I haven't gone recently, but yeah. So we would do a lot of like road trips to places like that, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. There's a lot of interesting roads out there, a lot of road trips, a lot of roadside Americana to talk about. But we're going to go in a different direction. We're going to go a little bit further out west instead of East Coast. Why don't you hit me with your story?
Absolutely. So if you are planning a road trip once quarantine lifts, as we talked about, finally being able to get out of the house, if you have a little one, you might look at going to Galena, Kansas. It's where the inspiration behind Tow Mater from Cars came from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know that, Disney expert. I will say Radiator Springs is my most favorite roller coaster in Disney.
Yeah, it's a good roller coaster.
It's the best. And this is totally off topic, but I mean, I guess Cars is kind of road trippy. But that park is also where my nephew had his first churro. And like it was a religious experience for him. Anyway, so if you have a little one, you might go see the Tow Mater truck in Galena, Kansas. Yeah. Or if you are a creep like me, you will go just down the street a little bit and go to the Kansas Murder Bordello that's in Galena. So it was built in 1890. It was originally constructed, get this, as an employment benefit for the Galena Mining Company. Yep. Which, like, I was super excited to work where I do because the health insurance is really good. But, like, imagine that your company just has a bordello on the side. You know? That's a lot.
At different times.
It's a very different time. HR...
And look, I mean, let me just say, I'm pro sex work. I mean, like, I think...
Yeah.
People want to do it.
Totally.
Totally down
Let's
with
do it in a safe way.
Do it in a safe way where... people are not getting murdered, because that's the other big target of a lot of murders.
Yes.
Are sex workers.
Yes.
So I would rather create a situation where they feel safe to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the bordello was run by a woman named Ma Steffelbach. She was one of history's business women, one of the few business women back in history. She served cheap whiskey and offered games of chance that were, of course, rigged for the house to win because that's just gambling. One thing that I really love about her is that she liked to be in control of everything. And so she had a partner named Charles Wilson, and she refused to marry him. She was like, you can live with me, you can help me run this bordello, but, like, I am not marrying you. Which, like, I think is kind of cool. Like, back then, women had to get married, they had to have kids, and, like, Ma was just living her own life. Mm-hmm. So, as the story goes, Ma was a real visionary, one might say. She was, like, always wanting to make $1, would kind of do whatever she could to, like, put more money in her wallet. So she realized that she could get some of these traveling Johns that would come in, either drugged or sloppy drunk, and rob them. And so she wouldn't get caught robbing them. She would enlist her sons to take these men to a back room and bludgeon them with an axe. Mm-hmm. And then her partner, who she refused to marry, would then put them in like a horse-drawn carriage, because it's like the 1890s, and drop them in the abandoned mines that were in the area. So the bodies would never be found. And she had this going for 6 years.
It's a lot of miners.
That's a lot of miners. It all ended when she got in a fight with one of her girls named Cora, and she kicked Cora out. They were living there. She wouldn't allow her to live there anymore. And Cora went straight to the sheriff, told them everything, had names of some of the missing miners, said where she was hiding the bodies. So they immediately go and start draining the mines and finding them. And they found one miner whose name was Frank Galbraith, and that was enough to convict them. They were convicted in 1897. They all went to jail. Charles, her sons, Ma. She was in jail for 12 years, and then she passed away. But she said she was innocent the entire time that she was in jail. She was really cautious, and she would hide the gold and the loot that she would steal from these dudes, but it's never been found. Mm-hmm. And they've only found 2 bodies. because they would hide them everywhere. But it's estimated, I mean, she was doing this for 6 years. It's estimated that there's at least 50 men that she killed.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
So it was a lot easier back then to dispose of bodies and then just make people disappear.
Totally. I mean, in the seance story you talk about, there is a guy that just vanished off the face of the earth. You know, it happened back then. So in 2013, it reopened as a museum. It has this like weird, crazy crow, like tree statue outside of it because a group of crows is called a murder. There's a woman named Christine who runs a blog called JoplinMissouriLife.com. Joplin, Missouri is like a 10-minute drive. That's right across the border. She did a tour of the house and claimed to feel several cold spots, especially in the bathroom. And it was an 80-degree day. So it's not like it was like a cold December day. She also learned while going through this tour in 1990, it was turned into a nursing home. So not only is there the energy of these deceased men from the Bordello, it was also a nursing home, and old people passed away there as well. So there's a lot of different types of energy there. So if you're in Kansas, you can go and pop by, see if any of the spirits haunt you. They have a Facebook page. And there's also, if you want more information about Ma, where I got most of mine from was this really good book called The Bedside Book of Bad Girls, Outlaw Women of the Old West by Michael Root. And if you're not living your life to like be put in a book like that, I think you're doing it wrong.
I am familiar with this story, and I'm familiar with the supposed hauntings of the place. That being the actual location of the Bordello is somewhat
suspect. Yes. So Ron Warnick, who runs Route 66 News, found a woman named Marilyn Schmidt, who's part of the Genealogical Historical Society. And she found a journal saying that the Bordello was actually further out of town and that it was a much smaller place and that it actually burned down before the family was ever arrested.
Yeah, but that doesn't take away from any potential hauntings that might be
totally
there. And
I mean, it's just a fun story.
It is. No, I mean, well, fun. I mean, it's...
But like a good story to tell.
Well, I mean, so I've done a fair amount of research on Route 66, and Route 66 starts out, or used to run 2,448 mile route. It was called the Main Street of America, and it began in a place where you called home, Chicago.
Tri-City.
Yes, and would dip down into Missouri, and just briefly crossed over into Kansas, right by Galena, and then down to Oklahoma, through the top of Texas, across New Mexico, Arizona, and then concluding in Los Angeles area in California. So just a couple things about Route 66 that I want to talk about before I just kind of mention my location. This is more of like a long journey to get to where I'm going to, but
I'm ready. I'm buckled in my seatbelt.
So the number 66 has a lot of significance. So this was a important route, this Main Street of America. It was a national artery, and it's also been a route that has seen a lot of weird hauntings, odd crimes. Even before it was a road known as Route 66, it was supposedly just imbued with a lot of spiritual activity. The number 66 itself, within certain occult circles, represents a loss in faith in the divine, an emergence of a self-serving nature on a path to material fulfillment. It can also mean a curse. Metaphysical circles, 66 refers to unseen energies or creative inspiration. So that's all interesting because the father of Route 66, his name was Cyrus Avery, and he was a Freemason.
Freemasons.
Yes.
They're so fascinating.
And Route 66 also follows along pretty close at times to the 33rd parallel. It dips down and follows along 33rd parallel. 33 is another significant number to the Freemasons. But if you go to Oklahoma, where it crosses over, there is a Masonic lodge hiding in plain sight, which is not unusual. I mean, Masonic lodges, there's a lot of interesting lore and history behind them, but it's not odd to find a Masonic lodge. It's interesting, though, that Route 66 is marked along the way by Masonic obelisks, or was. So that Masonic lodge is pretty much hiding in plain sight, and it's at a Route 66 museum in Oklahoma, and I just find that kind of fascinating. It's in Bristow, Oklahoma, I believe, and I find that fascinating because it just kind of connects the meaning of Route 66 with the Masons and all that good stuff. But it's also Route 66 is known for quirky, like, roadside motels, all sorts of interesting hauntings. It's just, as a road itself, it is almost paranormal in nature.
Well, and it's just so tied to Americana culture.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the driving culture. In addition to the Masonic tributes, there was, like, along the way, there's stories of, like, UFOs. UFOs are spotted along the route. There's supposedly in Amarillo, Texas, there's another UFO sighting, Zone 11, which dates back to 1950. I feel like I'm breaking our format a little bit because I'm just talking about a lot of different things instead of one specific tale. But I think the focus on that would be the Masonic Lodge in Bristow, Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because you see, I guess I haven't noticed them as much in New York, but in Chicago, you see a ton of, like, the Freemason symbols on buildings and things like that. It's everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I find the idea of the Freemasons and secret societies to be interesting, and it's fascinating to me that this road, which we know for all the roadside attractions along it, was Cyrus Avery was said to view this route as sort of a occult pilgrimage, like a Freemason occult pilgrimage. So the fact that we gravitated to that is interesting to me. But one other Route 66 fact that I would leave you with is, even before it was Route 66, in 1857, it was known as the Journey of Death. That route was, and there was a caravan of camels, a U.S. caravan of camels. Yes,
what?
That had journeyed along the road in 1857.
Where did they come from?
They were like a U.S. kind of cavalry.
Of camels?
Yeah, it was a caravan of camels.
But camels are not native to the United States.
No, it was called the First U.S. Army Camel Corps, and they arrived from Africa in the early part of 1857, and it was part of a survey expedition. So.
And what was their job?
Surveying.
But what does that mean?
I guess it means, like, James Buchanan wanted Beale to survey and build a wagon road from Fort Defiance to Colorado River, and that's between Arizona and California.
Okay.
And the camels were sort of an experiment to use in the desert. And, camels could carry more weight than horses or mules.
Wow.
And they thought that they could be, and they can travel without water or as much rest.
Yeah, because they store it in the hump.
Right. You know your camel facts.
I do. Happy hump day.
And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like that was a little thin on my part as far as stories. I thought I had more going on with that one, and clearly I don't. It was just sort of, I was spurred by the idea that Route 66 as a road is really like a place of worship for Americana. And, we have essentially American temples, our version of worship in the form of kitsch and creativity and economic worship along Route 66. So that's what I got.
That's what you got.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, guys, for listening to our shorter episode today. Hopefully it gets you through your quarantine. Please find us on the social media. We are NightMerica Podcast on Instagram. And if you have a fantastic short story to share with us, you can do so by emailing nightmericashow@gmail.com. You can find us personally. I'm at That Shop Girl on Instagram, and Aaron over there is just Aaron Sagers at Aaron Sagers on all the social medias. And you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you listen, please rate, review, subscribe, send it to a friend. It really helps little but mighty podcasts like us.
Thank you for listening, and remember, wherever you found us, whichever platform you downloaded from, wherever you are listening to us, wherever you're listening to this podcast right this moment, in your car, at home, at maybe work, if you're back at work, wherever you find us, we hope we find you right back here again for another episode of NightMerica.